The headlights came from nowhere. One moment I was crossing the busy intersection near the OSU Oxford Street in Accra, my arms full of shopping bags from the market, plantain, tomatoes, contamire for the week's meals. I was thinking about the custody hearing scheduled for the following Tuesday, wondering if my husband Kwame would finally agree to joint custody of our daughter Alma, who was only 6 years old. The next moment, metal crushing bone, my body lifting off the ground like a rag doll, then nothing but asphalt and agony that tore through me like lightning. I remember screaming Kwame's name. He was supposed to pick me up from the market. We'd agreed on it that morning, despite the tension between us, despite the divorce proceedings. For Alma's sake, we were trying to be civil. The vehicle didn't stop. It accelerated. Through the haze of pain radiating from everywhere and nowhere, I saw it. A black Toyota Land Cruiser with a dented front bumper and a cracked headlight. The same vehicle my brother Kofi always borrowed from our Uncle Ya. But that couldn't be right. My vision was blurring, darkening at the edges. The street light above me flickered. One of those old sodium lamps that gave everything an orange glow. As I lay there unable to move my legs, unable to feel anything below my waist except a terrifying numbness that felt like death creeping up my body. My shopping bags had scattered like broken dreams around me. Tomatoes crushed on the pavement, red like blood in the streetlight. Plantains rolled into the gutter. A bottle of palm wine I'd bought for Uncle Ya's birthday next week had shattered, the smell mixing with blood and gasoline. The sirens came eventually. 23 minutes, the paramedic told me later. 23 minutes of me lying there watching cars slow down, seeing faces peer out at me, some stopping to stare before driving on. This was Accra. People were afraid to get involved, afraid of being blamed, afraid of juju accusations or police harassment. I kept trying to turn my head to see the license plate, but my neck wouldn't cooperate. My phone had skidded somewhere into the darkness. All I could do was stare at the traffic light cycling through its colors. Red, yellow, green, red again, while my blood pooled beneath me, sticky and warm against the cooling evening pavement. My legs felt like television static, like they'd been replaced with something that wasn't quite mine. Buzzing with sensation that wasn't pain, wasn't numbness, just profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. And somewhere in my fading consciousness, as people finally began to gather around me, as I heard someone shouting for help in Chui, I kept thinking about that Land Cruiser, about how familiar it looked, about how it seemed to hesitate for just a second before speeding away into Accra's chaotic evening traffic, leaving me there to die on the street like a dog. 3 days. That's how long I was unconscious. When I finally opened my eyes, my mother was there, pressing a white handkerchief against her face, her gelly slightly askew from what must have been days at my bedside. She wore her Sunday best Anchor dress, the deep purple one with gold threading that she only wore for important occasions. Or tragedies. "Ajoa, my daughter," she whispered, gripping my hand. "Thank the ancestors you've opened your eyes. We thought we'd lost you." But something in her voice sounded rehearsed, practiced, like the lines in a Nigerian movie she'd watched too many times. My father stood by the window, overlooking the Coral Boutique hospital parking lot, his back rigid, his expensive abaya stained with something dark. He hadn't changed clothes in days. I tried to ask about Kwame, about why he hadn't come to get me that night as promised, but my throat was raw from the breathing tube they'd just removed. The words came out as a painful croak. The doctor arrived, a middle-aged Ghanaian woman with kind eyes that couldn't quite hide the devastating news she carried. Dr. Mensah had trained in South Africa, came back to serve her people, and now had to deliver the worst possible prognosis. "The impact severely damaged your spinal cord," she explained gently, showing me x-rays that meant nothing to my untrained eyes. "T12 vertebra. There's significant trauma to the nerve pathways." I didn't understand at first. Then she said it plainly, clearly, with the kind of directness that Ghanaian doctors are trained to deliver bad news. "Miss Ajoa, you may never walk again." The words hung in the sterile air like a death sentence, like a curse from a powerful witch doctor that couldn't be broken. My mother's crying intensified, loud, theatrical wailing that brought nurses rushing in. But when I looked at her, really looked at her through my pain-hazed vision, her eyes were dry. bone dry. My father still hadn't turned around from that window. Where's Kwame? I managed to rasp. Where's my husband? Where's Alma? The silence that followed was deafening, filled only with the beeping of machines and the distant sounds of the hospital. Patients moaning, trolleys rattling, the call to prayer drifting from a nearby mosque. Finally, my father spoke without turning around, his Fanny accent thick with something I couldn't identify. Shame? Guilt? Fear? He's handling some business matters. You just focus on getting better. But I caught something in the window's reflection, a look exchanged between my parents. Quick and guilty, like thieves caught stealing from the family pot. My brother Kofi arrived later that afternoon, reeking of akbateshi, local gin, like he was trying to cover something else up. Fear, maybe, or blood guilt. He couldn't look me in the eye, kept his gaze fixed on the floor tiles, counting them like they held the secrets of the ancestors. Aye, sis, he muttered in Chui, his hands shaking slightly. Crazy accident. Very crazy. Do you remember anything? Anything at all? The question felt weighted, dangerous, like asking someone if they'd seen a ghost in a village where everyone knew the ghost was real. I tried to piece together that night, but morphine kept pulling me under, drowning my memories in chemical fog before I could grab hold of them. I caught fragments, headlights, the smell of diesel, someone shouting, the crunch of impact, but they scattered like smoke whenever I tried to focus. Kwame filed for divorce 6 weeks after the accident. Didn't have the courage to tell me himself. Didn't come to my hospital room, where I was still learning to control basic bodily functions, where nurses had to turn me every few hours to prevent bed sores, where I cried myself to sleep wondering if I'd ever hold my daughter again. Instead, he sent his lawyer, a slick-a-craw lawyer in an expensive suit with his briefcase full of documents that might as well have been weapons. The attorney was young, clearly uncomfortable, shuffling papers like they were on fire. Mr. Mensah feels the marriage is no longer viable, he said in that overly formal English that educated Ghanaians use when delivering bad news. Given your condition and the lengthy recovery prospects, he believes it's best for both parties to move forward separately. Those were his actual words. Not viable. Like I was a failed business venture instead of the woman who'd loved Kwame since we met at the University of Ghana, who'd worked 2 jobs at a hotel and a shop to help fund his master's degree in business administration, who'd supported his family when his mother fell ill, who'd just found out she was pregnant 2 days before the accident. I lost the baby in the first surgery. Nobody told me for a month. They said the trauma was too severe, that my body couldn't sustain a pregnancy while fighting for its own survival, while my spine was shattered, while my organs were failing. When I finally asked about the cramping I remembered from before the accident, the nurse's face crumpled with pity. "Oh, sister," she said softly in Chui, taking my hand. "I thought someone had told you. I'm so sorry." Kwame had been informed immediately. Never said a word. Never came to grieve with me. Never held my hand. Never acknowledged that we'd lost a child together. He just started the divorce proceedings like he was discarding damaged goods at the market. My mother tried to justify it when I confronted her, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. "Ajoa, you have to understand," she said, her voice taking on that reasonable tone that Ghanaian mothers use when they're about to say something terrible. "Kwame is young. He wants more children, wants a wife who can give him a proper home, who can walk, who can perform her wifely duties. You can't expect him to sacrifice his future." The words hit me harder than the Land Cruiser had. "So I'm worthless now?" My voice cracked like dry earth in Harmattan season. "Because I can't walk?" She patted my hand with that same theatrical gesture, her long nails painted bright red. "It's not about worth, my dear. It's about being realistic. This is Africa. A man needs a strong wife. You understand." I understood, all right. I understood that even my own mother valued my functionality over my humanity. My father sold my house while I was in rehabilitation. The house my grandmother, my dear Nana had left me in her will. The 3-bedroom house in Dansaman that was supposed to be my security, my inheritance, my daughter's future. He just sold it, forged my signature on documents, moved the money into an account I couldn't access from my hospital bed. "The medical bills are mounting," he explained when I finally found out, his voice heavy with fake concern. "We needed the money for your care. The hospital was threatening to discharge you. I never saw a single Sadie from that sale. Never signed any papers. The house was gone, sold to some Lebanese businessman who wanted to tear it down and build apartments. When I tried to protest, tried to say this was illegal, my father's expression hardened. You want to take me to court? Your own father? After everything we've done for you? We could have let you die on that street. The words hung between us like a physical thing. Could have let you die. As if keeping me alive was a favor they could withdraw at any moment. Uncle Ya came to visit on a Tuesday, unexpected and nervous. He'd been like a second father to me after my own dad had emotionally checked out during my teenage years, spending his time and money at drinking spots while Uncle Ya paid my school fees, bought my uniforms, attended parent-teacher meetings. But this visit felt different. Wrong. He brought flowers, white lilies, the kind Ghanaians bring to funerals, and kept glancing at the door like he expected the police to burst in at any moment. His usual jovial demeanor was gone, replaced by a jittery anxiety that made his hands shake. "How's the memory, Ajoa?" he asked, too casual, perched on the edge of the visitor's chair like a bird ready to take flight. From that night, I mean. The police have been asking questions, coming around the house, bothering your auntie. I told him the truth. It was fragmented, like a broken mirror with pieces missing. I remembered headlights, the sound of impact like thunder inside my skull, the sensation of flying. But the details were slippery, coated in trauma's protective fog. His shoulders relaxed visibly, his whole body seeming to deflate with relief. "That's probably for the best," he said, nodding too enthusiastically. "Sometimes God blocks out bad memories to protect us. The mind has ways of shielding itself from things too painful to remember." Strange words from a man who hadn't been to church in 20 years, who'd always mocked my mother's Christianity as colonial brainwashing. Kofi started visiting regularly after that, almost too regularly, always asking the same probing questions disguised as brotherly concern. "You getting any flashbacks, sis?" he'd ask, leaning close, his breath carrying that permanent smell of akpateshi mixed with something sour. "Fear, maybe. Sometimes head injuries cause false memories. Very vivid ones that seem real but aren't. The doctor told me that." He'd lean in closer, his bloodshot eyes searching my face. "You can't always trust what you think you remember. The brain plays tricks, especially after trauma. You understand?" I noticed his hands shaking constantly now, how he'd flinch at loud noises, a door slamming, a trolley rattling past, the dark circles under his eyes like bruises that wouldn't heal. He'd lost weight, his usually well-fitted clothes hanging loose on his frame. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke to voices outside my hospital room. Male voices, harsh whispers in English and Chui. I couldn't make out most of it, but I heard my name, Ajoa, heard someone say, "What if she remembers?" In panic, Chui heard what sounded like Kwame's voice say something about taking care of it in that cold tone he used when discussing business problems. When I pressed the call button, they scattered. The nurse found me alone, confused, insisting there had been men outside my door just seconds ago. She checked the hallway, came back shaking her head. "Sister, there's nobody here. Must have been a dream from the medication." But I smelled Kofi's cologne, that cheap stuff he bought from the Lebanese stores on OSU. I saw 3 empty Malta bottles in the trash that hadn't been there before. I wasn't crazy. Something was very, very wrong. And it all centered around that night, around what I couldn't quite remember, around the black Land Cruiser that had appeared in my fragmentary nightmares with increasing clarity. Detective Inspector Grace Osei was patient, persistent, and the only person who seemed to believe me. She was in her early 50s, had worked her way up through the Ghana police service when it was even more difficult for women, had seen enough corruption and family cover-ups to recognize truth through trauma. She wore her uniform with pride, kept her hair in a neat low cut, and had eyes that missed nothing. "The hit-and-run investigation remains active," she explained during her 3rd visit, speaking in that careful mix of English and Chui that educated Ghanaians use. "We found evidence at the scene. Paint transfer, broken glass, tire tracks. The vehicle was a Toyota Land Cruiser, probably 10 to 15 years old, black or very dark blue." I watched my mother's face drain of color beneath her makeup. She'd been visiting when the detective arrived, had been fussing with my bed sheets, adjusting my pillows, and suddenly remembered an urgent appointment, practically running from the room, her heels clicking frantically against the tiles. Detective Osei noticed. She noticed everything. Your family seems very uncomfortable when I visit, she observed, pulling out a small notebook. Any idea why that might be? I didn't want to say it. Didn't want to believe what my subconscious had been screaming at me for weeks. But small details were accumulating like rainwater before a flood, impossible to ignore. Kofi's Land Cruiser, Uncle Ya's vehicle that he borrowed constantly, had disappeared right after the accident. Uncle Ya, who'd driven that black beast for years, suddenly appeared in a different car, a silver Camry, claiming he'd traded the Land Cruiser for better fuel efficiency. Kwame had scratches on his arms during one hospital visit, deep ones, angry and fresh. He'd blamed them on moving boxes, on cleaning out our old apartment. But we'd had helpers for that. I keep having this dream, I told the detective, my voice barely above a whisper, checking the door to make sure no family members had appeared. About the moment before impact. In the dream, I could see inside the vehicle. I can see the driver's face. Detective Osei leaned forward, her pen poised. Tell me. I closed my eyes, forced myself back to that terrible moment despite every instinct screaming to leave it buried. The headlights. The acceleration. And in the split second before impact, the streetlight illuminating the driver's face through the windscreen. It looked like my brother. I whispered, shame burning through me at the betrayal of even speaking the words. Like Kofi. But that's impossible. That's crazy. Kofi would never hurt me. We grew up together, shared everything, protected each other. Detective Osei didn't tell me it was crazy. She didn't dismiss it as medication-induced fantasy. She wrote something in her notebook, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes sharp with interest. Your brother Kofi, does he have regular access to a black Toyota Land Cruiser? I told her about Uncle Ya's vehicle, about how Kofi borrowed it at least 3 times a week, about how it had vanished. She nodded slowly, making more notes. Miss Ajoa, I need you to understand something, she said seriously. In my 25 years as a police officer, I've seen many cases where family members were involved in crimes against their own. It's more common than people think, especially in cases involving property, inheritance, or family disputes. She handed me her card, official Ghana Police Service with her direct mobile number written on the back in pen. If anyone tries to talk you out of remembering, tries to convince you your memories are false, or threatens you in any way, call me immediately, day or night. Do you understand? I understood. I understood that my family might have tried to kill me, and they were still trying to make sure the truth stayed buried. The Casa Rehabilitation Center became my prison and my salvation. It was a private facility in East Legon, expensive, paid for by money I didn't know I had, probably from my grandmother's house sale that my father claimed went to medical bills. My physiotherapist was a no-nonsense Nigerian woman named Chioma who'd worked with spinal cord injuries for 20 years across 3 African countries. Your doctor said you'd never walk, she told me on day 1, her accent thick with Lagos confidence. I say let's prove them all wrong. But I won't lie to you, sister. It's going to hurt worse than anything you've ever experienced. Worse than the accident itself. She wasn't exaggerating. Every session was agony. They'd strap me into a harness, force my useless legs to remember movements they'd forgotten, movements my spinal cord could no longer command properly. Electrodes would stimulate muscles that wouldn't fire on their own. My legs would jerk like a puppet's, but I had no control. The first time I stood, supported by a complex system of machinery, harnesses, and Chioma's iron grip, I lasted 9 seconds before collapsing in screaming tears, my legs buckling, every nerve in my lower body shrieking in protest. But I came back the next day, and the next, and the next, not because I was brave or inspirational, but because I was furious. Furious at my family, at Kwame, at the universe, and my own broken body. That fury became fuel. During one session, a GTV news story played on the waiting room television. Police continue investigation into hit and run that left local woman paralyzed. Authorities seek information on black Toyota Land Cruiser scene, leaving the scene on OSU Oxford Street. They showed my intersection, the skid marks still faintly visible on the pavement. My father, who'd come to support my session, immediately grabbed the remote and changed the channel, his hand shaking so badly he dropped it. "No need to relive that trauma," he said too quickly, too loudly. "Focus on moving forward, not looking back." Chioma noticed everything. After he left, she asked quietly, "Your family doesn't want you to remember that night, do they?" I broke down completely, told her everything. The suspicious visits, the strange questions, the way they all seemed terrified of my memories returning, the disappeared vehicle, Kwame's sudden divorce. She listened without interrupting, then shared something that changed everything. "I had a patient once in Lagos, similar situation," she said softly. "Family visiting constantly, but something feeling wrong. Turned out her own uncle had hit her while drunk driving. Kept visiting to monitor what she remembered, to manipulate her recovery narrative. She eventually remembered everything." Testified. He went to Kirikiri Maximum Prison for 12 years. My blood turned to ice water. The body keeps the score even when the mind protects itself. Chioma continued, gripping my hand. "Your memories will come back when you're strong enough to handle them. Until then, document everything. Every visitor, every strange comment, every inconsistency. You're going to need evidence." I started keeping a journal that night, hidden in my bedside drawer like contraband. Every suspicious visit, every odd question, every family member who seemed more interested in what I remembered than how I was healing. The entries painted a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. It happened 6 months into rehabilitation, during a nightmare that felt different from all the others. I was back at that intersection, the evening market crowds around me, the smell of grilled fish and wache in the air. The headlights approached, but this time everything was crystal clear. Sharp edges, vivid colors, sounds that seemed amplified. I could see inside the Land Cruiser through the windscreen. Kofi driving, his eyes wide with panic and intoxication, his hands gripping the wheel too tightly. Kwame in the passenger seat, shouting something at him. "Kofi, stop. Slow down." His face contorted with alarm. Uncle Ya in the back seat, leaning forward, his mouth open in a horrified shout. In the split second before impact, Kofi's eyes met mine across the distance. He recognized me. I saw it happen, the moment of recognition, the flash of horror, the panicked decision. And his foot stayed on the accelerator. The impact came, bone-shattering, life-ending, and then I heard them. Heard everything. Kwame screaming in Twi, "Go! Go! Drive! Now!" Uncle Ya, his voice high with panic. "She's not moving. We need to leave. Now!" Kofi sobbing. "That was a Joa. That was my sister. Oh God, Jesus Christ, that was my sister." Kwame again, cold and calculating. "If we stop now, we all go to prison. Drive. Now." And they drove away, leaving me broken on the pavement like garbage, like I meant nothing, like 17 years of siblinghood and marriage and family meant less than their freedom. I woke up screaming so loudly that 3 nurses came running, thinking I was having a medical crisis. But this wasn't a dream or a morphine hallucination. This was memory, sharp and terrible and undeniable, cutting through the protective fog like a machete through bush. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, nearly dropped it twice before managing to dial. Detective Osei answered on the second ring despite it being 3 a.m. I remember everything. I gasped, tears streaming down my face. It was them, all 3 of them. Kofi, Kwame, and Uncle Ya. They hit me and they left me there to die. They saw me and they drove away. The detective went silent for a moment. A silence that felt heavy with significance. "Miss Ajoa, I need you to stay calm and listen carefully," she said in that authoritative voice. "I'm coming to you right now. Don't tell anyone about this memory. Not your mother, not your father, not any family member. Nobody. Do you understand? This is critical." I understood. I understood that my family had tried to murder me. Maybe not intentionally. Kofi had been drunk. It was supposed to be an accident. They'd panicked. But leaving me there, that was a choice. Coming to the hospital afterwards, pretending to care while secretly monitoring whether I'd remember, that was calculated. filing for divorce, selling my house, isolating me from my daughter that was covering their tracks. Every visit, every fake tear, every expression of love had been a performance, a lie wrapped in self-preservation. The rage that filled me was physical, burning through my veins like fire ants under my skin. I'd spent 6 months breaking my body to relearn how to stand, how to take a single step, how to exist in this new reality. And the whole time, the people who'd put me in this wheelchair were coming to my bedside, holding my hand, telling me they loved me, while secretly praying I'd never remember what they'd done. They betrayed me in every way a family could betray someone. And now, finally, I was going to make them pay. Detective Osei arrived at the rehabilitation center within an hour, bringing with her a tape recorder and the district attorney, a serious woman named Alma Darko, who had a reputation for prosecuting difficult cases. We sat in a private room, and I told them everything. Every detail of the memory that had returned with such brutal clarity. They recorded my statement, asked clarifying questions, watched my face for signs of fabrication or medication-induced confusion. They found none. My story was consistent, detailed, and matched the physical evidence they'd been quietly gathering for months. We found the vehicle, Detective Osei revealed, her voice carefully neutral. Your uncle reported it stolen 4 days after your accident, but he waited 96 hours to file the report. Major red flag. We impounded it from a chop shop in Ashiman. The front end had been completely replaced, amateur work, but they couldn't hide everything. She showed me photographs, the Land Cruiser in pieces, its original front bumper and hood in evidence bags, microscopic traces of paint transfer, biological material caught in the undercarriage that DNA testing had confirmed was mine. They tried to destroy it, the DA added, her expression grim. But they weren't smart enough or thorough enough. We have physical evidence. We have their phone records from that night, showing they were all together, and now we have your testimony. I felt sick and vindicated in equal measure. What about my parents? I asked. They've been helping cover this up. My mother knew from the beginning. Alma Darko's expression hardened. We're investigating that angle. At minimum, obstruction of justice, possibly accessory after the fact. Your father's document forgery is definitely prosecutable. This goes deeper than just the hit and run. They arrested Kofi first at dawn, broadcasting it on national television. I watched from my rehabilitation room as Ghana television showed my brother being led out of his Medina apartment in handcuffs, trying to hide his face from cameras, his expensive shirt wrinkled from what must have been a sleepless night. The news anchor, speaking in a mix of English and Chui, said, "Police have arrested a suspect in the 10-month-old hit and run that left a local woman paralyzed. Sources indicate the suspect is the victim's own brother, raising questions about family violence and justice in Ghana." My phone exploded with calls from my mother. I didn't answer. Let her wonder. Let her panic. Let her feel a fraction of the fear I'd felt lying on that street, wondering if I'd die alone. Kwame was arrested at his office in OSU. Very public, very humiliating, security guards and colleagues watching as police led him away. The man who'd called me not viable now faced charges that could end his career and freedom. Uncle tried to run. They caught him at a Fleo border, trying to cross into Togo with 50,000 cedis in cash and a fake passport. His plan had been to get to Nigeria, then disappear into that vast country where Ghanaian law couldn't easily reach him. The bail hearing was my first time seeing them all together since I'd remembered. I'd insisted on attending despite Chioma's concerns about stress affecting my recovery. She wheeled me into the courtroom in Accra, and I felt every eye in that packed room turned toward me. Kofi looked like he'd aged 20 years in 2 weeks. His skin was ashen, his usually neat beard wild and unkempt. Kwame wouldn't meet my gaze, kept his eyes fixed on the floor. Uncle Ya stared at me with what looked like pure hatred, like I was the villain in this story for having the audacity to survive and remember. The prosecutor argued they were flight risks. Uncle Ya had already tried to flee, and dangers to the witness. Kofi's lawyer, paid for by my father who still had money from selling my house, argued this was a tragic accident and his client had been living with devastating guilt. I couldn't stay silent. Your Honor, My voice rang out, surprising everyone, including myself. "May I speak?" The judge, a stern man named Justice Mensa, looked surprised but nodded. "The court recognizes the victim." I wheeled myself forward, every eye in the courtroom on me. Chioma stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder for support. "Tragic accident," I repeated, my voice steady despite rage trembling through my entire body. "That's what they're calling it. But an accident is when you hit someone and immediately call the ambulance, render aid, try to save their life. What happened to me was attempted murder followed by 10 months of psychological torture." I looked directly at Kofi, forced him to meet my eyes. "You saw my face. We made eye contact across that intersection. You knew it was your sister on that crosswalk, and you chose to keep your foot on the accelerator. You chose not to brake. Then you left me bleeding on the pavement like I was nothing, like 27 years of being your big sister meant nothing." His lawyer tried to object, but Justice Mensa waved her silent. "Let her speak." I turned to Kwame, my ex-husband, the father of the child we'd lost. "You filed for divorce while I was learning to use a bedpan. You didn't tell me we'd lost our baby. You just erased me like I'd never mattered, like 6 years of marriage was nothing. All while you knew exactly why I was in that hospital bed, because you were there that night. You watched it happen and told my brother to run." Kwame's face crumpled, finally showing genuine emotion. Shame, maybe, or fear of consequences. Finally, I looked at Uncle Ya, the man who'd taught me to ride a bicycle, who'd walk me down the aisle when my father was too drunk, who'd pay my school fees and call me his favorite niece. "You helped destroy the evidence. You reported the vehicle stolen days later after you'd had time to dismantle it, to try to erase what you'd done. You came to my hospital room with funeral flowers, asking if I remembered, praying to whatever gods you believe and that I wouldn't. That I'd stay conveniently brain damaged enough to never identify you." The courtroom was absolutely silent, except for someone crying softly in the back. "Your Honor, these men didn't just hit me with a vehicle," I continued, my voice breaking but not stopping. "They've spent 10 months trying to run me over again, emotionally, psychologically, financially. They attended my physical therapy sessions, pretending to support me, while secretly terrified I'd remember. They manipulated my parents into helping cover their tracks. They sold my grandmother's house without my permission to pay for the lawyers standing here, calling this a tragic accident. Tears streamed down my face now, but my voice never wavered. I spent 312 days learning to stand again. Every single one of those days, I thought my family loved me. I thought the reason Kofi couldn't look at me was because he was heartbroken about my condition. I thought Kwame left because he couldn't handle seeing me disabled. I gave him grace. I forgave their absence, their awkwardness, because I love them. I wiped my eyes, my hands shaking. But they weren't heartbroken. They were guilty. And instead of confessing, instead of giving me the truth, they let me suffer. They watched me cry myself to sleep, watched me fight through agony and physical therapy, watched me lose everything, my marriage, my home, my ability to walk, my baby, and they said nothing. Justice Mensa was leaning forward now, his expression grave. "These men don't deserve bail," I said firmly. "They deserve exactly what they gave me that night, to be left alone in the dark, wondering if anyone cares whether they survive. They deserve to feel the fear I felt, the abandonment, the betrayal." The judge denied bail for all three. They would remain in custody until trial. As the guards led them away, Kofi turned back, his eyes meeting mine one last time. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. "Ajoa, I'm so sorry." I looked away. Sorry wasn't enough. Sorry wouldn't give me back my legs, my marriage, my child, my trust. Sorry was just another word from a man who'd proven his words meant nothing. The trial began 8 months later at the Accra High Court. By then, I'd progressed from wheelchair to walker for short distances. Each step a victory and a reminder of what they'd stolen. The media dubbed it the family betrayal trial, and the courthouse became a circus. Camera crews from Joy News, GV, TV3, even CNN Africa parked outside. Protesters with signs reading "Justice for Ajoa" in English and Twi lined the streets. My face was everywhere. Newspapers, social media, television. The story had captured Ghana's imagination, a woman paralyzed by her own family, learning to walk again to testify against them. The prosecution's case was devastating. They had the Land Cruiser, paint transfer matching my clothes, blood evidence in the undercarriage that Kofi's amateur cleaning hadn't fully removed, glass fragments that matched the shattered headlight found at the scene. They had phone records proving all three men were together that night, showing a flurry of calls between them in the hours after the accident. 16 calls between 8:47 p.m. and 3:22 a.m., each one evidence of conspiracy. They had testimony from the chop shop owner in Ashiaman who'd been paid 8,000 cedis to make the vehicle disappear, who'd kept records because he suspected he might need insurance against prosecution. They had CCTV footage from a nearby shop showing the Land Cruiser speeding away from the scene, the timestamp matching exactly when I was hit. And they had me. Taking the stand was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Harder than learning to walk again. Harder than accepting that my family had tried to kill me. Harder than every physical therapy session combined. I wore a traditional Kent cloth dress, the kind worn for important occasions, for ceremonies, for moments that would define your life. Chioma had helped me get ready that morning, had steadied me as I practiced walking the 10 steps from the courtroom door to the witness stand. "You can do this," she'd whispered. "You are stronger than all of them combined." The defense attorneys circled like vultures. Kofi's lawyer, a sharp Ghanaian woman named Akua Asani who trained in London, tried to paint me as confused, traumatized, my memories unreliable. "Miss Ajoa, isn't it true you were unconscious for 3 days after the accident?" she asked in crisp English. "Yes. And isn't it possible that during that time, while your brain was healing from severe trauma, it constructed false memories to explain what happened to you?" I looked at the jury, 12 Ghanaians of various ages, backgrounds, tribes. Men and women who understood family, who understood betrayal, who would decide my brother's fate. "My brain didn't construct the paint evidence," I said calmly. "It didn't construct the phone records showing 16 calls between the defendants in the hours after they hit me. It didn't construct my brother selling that Land Cruiser to a chop shop for 8,000 cedis 3 days later. My memory is confirmed by physical evidence." Akua switched tactics, her voice taking on that reasonable tone that lawyers use when they're trying to manipulate. "You were angry at your brother, weren't you? He borrowed money from you over the years. Money he never repaid. You resented him." "I love my brother," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I raised him when our father was too busy drinking. I paid for his polytechnic education. I believed in him. Yes, there were tensions. That's normal in families. But that doesn't mean I'd fabricate being run over and left to die." She pressed harder, her voice rising. "You were on heavy pain medication during the months these memories supposedly returned. Morphine, tramadol, other opioids. Isn't it possible?" "What's possible?" I interrupted, my voice cutting through her words like a knife. "Is that 3 grown men got drunk, hit a woman, their own sister and wife, and instead of doing the right thing, they chose to save themselves. They chose their freedom over my life. That's what's possible." The courtroom erupted. Justice Mensah gavelled for order. The prosecutor, a brilliant man named Kwesi Boateng, who'd built his career prosecuting corruption cases, was gentler during redirect. "Miss Ajoa, please tell the jury what that night took from you." I took a breath, gripping the walker that stood beside the witness box. "Everything," I said simply. "My mobility, I'll never walk normally again. My marriage, my husband divorced me rather than face what he'd done. My home, sold without my permission. My child, I lost the baby I was carrying in the surgeries. My sense of safety, I can't cross a street without panic attacks. My ability to trust, I look at every person now wondering if they're lying, if they're secretly hoping I'll die. My relationship with my daughter Alma, she's 8 now, confused about why mommy can't play with her, why daddy left, why her uncle is on trial. Tears flowed freely now. But most of all, they took my family. Not just by being the ones who hit me, but by lying about it for months. By coming to my hospital room, holding my hand, pretending to love me, while secretly praying I'd never remember their faces. That's the cruelest part, the deception, the manipulation, the calculated betrayal that happened every single day for 10 months. The prosecution called Chioma, my physical therapist, who testified about the severity of my injuries. Her spinal cord injury is permanent and life-altering. Chioma explained to the jury in her Nigerian accent. The fact that she can walk short distances with a walker is extraordinary, a testament to her determination and pain tolerance, not to any minimal nature of the injury. Most patients with her level of damage never walk again. She also testified about my mental state during therapy. There were sessions where she would break down completely, saying she wished she had died that night because the pain of betrayal hurt worse than the physical injuries. She trusted these men. She loved them. They watched her suffer for months and said nothing. That's a psychological wound that may never heal. Kofi's girlfriend Amma, not my daughter, but the woman he'd been dating when he hit me, took the stand next. She was young, scared, clearly pressured by prosecutors, but telling the truth nonetheless. The night it happened, Kofi came home around midnight. She testified in Twi, translated for the English-speaking judge and lawyers. He was drunk, crying, completely hysterical. He kept saying, "I killed her. I killed Ajoa," over and over. I thought he was being dramatic. He'd been drinking heavily. "What did you do?" Kwesi Boateng asked. He made me promise not to tell anyone he'd been drinking that night. Made me swear on my mother's life. He was terrified, shaking. I'd never seen him like that. Under cross-examination, she revealed more. The next few months were terrible. He had nightmares every night, would wake up screaming. Kwame came to our house frequently. They'd lock themselves in the bedroom, having intense conversations. Once I overheard them through the door. Kofi said, "What if she remembers our faces?" And Kwame said, "She won't. The doctor said the memory loss is probably permanent. But if she does remember, we'll deal with it." The most shocking testimony came from my mother. The prosecution had offered her immunity in exchange for truthful testimony. She'd taken the deal, knowing she'd either testify against her son or face prosecution herself for obstruction of justice. She looked 20 years older as she took the stand, wearing a simple cloth, no makeup, no jewelry. She couldn't look at me. The night of the accident, Ray called me around 10:30 p.m., she said in Twi, her voice barely audible. He said there had been an incident, that Kofi had borrowed his car and hit someone, that they'd panicked and driven away. He was calling to warn me that police might ask questions. "Did he tell you who they'd hit?" Kwesi asked. Her voice broke. Not until the next morning when the police called about my daughter. That's when I knew. That's when Ray admitted it was Ajoa. "And what did you do with that information?" Tears streamed down her face. I told my husband. We decided to protect Kofi. He's our son. We thought maybe if Ajoa never remembered, if the police never found evidence, we could all just move forward. We convinced ourselves it was an accident, that they'd panicked, that they didn't mean to hurt her. The courtroom was silent except for her crying. "What actions did you take to protect your son?" I visited the hospital to monitor what Ajoa remembered. I asked her questions to see if she could identify them. When she couldn't, I was relieved. I told my husband to sell her house so she wouldn't have resources to investigate, so she'd be dependent on us. We thought we could control the situation. She finally looked at me, her face destroyed by guilt. "I'm so sorry, Ajoa. I'm so sorry. I chose wrong. I chose my son over my daughter. I watched you suffer and said nothing. I held your hand while lying to your face. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know, I'm sorry." I felt Chioma's hand on my shoulder for where she sat behind me. I was shaking, unable to process that my own mother, the woman who'd given birth to me, nursed me, raised me, had chosen her son's freedom over my truth. The jury deliberated for 8 hours, long enough to be thorough, short enough to suggest the evidence was overwhelming. When they returned, the foreman, an older GA woman with gray hair wrapped in a headscarf, stood with a paper in her shaking hands. In the case of the Republic versus Kofi Mensah, on the charge of causing harm by dangerous driving while intoxicated, how do you find? Guilty. Kofi's head dropped to the table. His lawyer gripped his shoulder. On the charge of leaving the scene of an accident causing grievous bodily harm? Guilty. on the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice. Guilty. The same verdicts came for Kwame and Uncle Ya. Guilty on all counts. The evidence had been too strong, the testimony too damning, my survival and testimony too powerful to deny. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Justice Mensah, a man known for harsh sentences in serious cases, addressed each defendant individually. Kofi Mensah, he began, his voice echoing through the packed courtroom. You were given the gift of family, of a sister who loved you enough to raise you, educate you, support you. While intoxicated, a choice you made, you got behind the wheel of a vehicle. When you hit your sister, you had a choice: stop and help or flee. You chose cowardice. You then spent 10 months maintaining that cowardice, watching her suffer, manipulating her recovery, praying she'd never remember. He paused, looking at my brother with something like disgust. I sentence you to 15 years in solemn medium security prison. Kofi sobbed openly. His lawyer had argued for leniency. First-time offender, genuine remorse, cooperating with investigators. The judge wasn't moved. Kwame Mensah, Justice Mensah continued, turning to my ex-husband. You were this woman's husband. You took vows before God and family. In her darkest hour, when she needed you most, you abandoned her. Worse, you helped conceal the crime that destroyed her life. You filed for divorce while she was learning to feed herself. You never told her about the child you both lost. You treated her like defective merchandise to be discarded. His voice hardened. I sentence you to 12 years in solemn medium security prison. Additionally, your business license is permanently revoked. Kwame looked like he might vomit. His expensive education, his MBA, his career, all gone. Ya Apia, the judge said, addressing my uncle with particular severity. You are the most culpable. You own the vehicle. You helped destroy evidence. You coordinated the cover-up. You reported the vehicle stolen 4 days late, giving yourself time to dismantle it. You visited your niece in the hospital not to comfort her, but to manipulate her, to ensure she stayed silent. I sentence you to 20 years in solemn medium security prison. Uncle Ya's face went gray. At 62, a 20-year sentence was effectively life. Justice Mensah then turned to me. Miss Ajoa, I cannot give you back what was taken. I cannot restore your full mobility, your marriage, your child, your sense of safety. But I can tell you this. Your courage in pursuing justice despite overwhelming pressure from your own family has been extraordinary. You could have remained silent. You could have accepted their lies. Instead, you chose truth. He paused, his voice softening slightly. These men will face consequences. It's insufficient justice. How do you measure years in prison against what they took from you? But it's something. It's recognition that what they did was monstrous and that you deserve better. I was granted permission to read a victim impact statement. Standing there, actually standing, gripping my walker, my legs shaking from exertion, but holding, I looked at the 3 men who destroyed my life. I spent the first year after the accident believing I was unlucky. I began, my voice steady despite tears streaming down my face. I thought I was the victim of a random tragedy, that some drunk stranger had stolen my future. I grieved for my legs, my marriage, my baby, the life I'd planned. I paused, gathering strength. Then I remembered, and I realized my grief had been misdirected. I wasn't the victim of a stranger. I was the victim of the people who were supposed to protect me. I looked at each of them. You didn't just steal my ability to walk. You stole my ability to trust, to feel safe, to believe in family, to believe in love. Those might be invisible injuries, but they're just as permanent as my damaged spine. To my mother, sitting in the gallery, you chose him over me. Every single day, you held my hand while lying to my face. That's a betrayal I'll carry forever. To Kofi, you were my little brother. I raised you. I protected you. I loved you. And you left me in the street like garbage. Like 27 years of sisterhood meant nothing. To Kwame, we lost a baby, our child, and you mourned alone in silence, while filing papers to erase me from your life. That's not just cruel. That's evil. To Uncle Ya, you taught me that family protects family. You were right. I just wish you believed your own lesson. I took a shaky breath. But here's what you didn't count on. I survived. Not just the accident, but your betrayal. I'll learn to stand again, literally and figuratively. I will walk out of this courtroom on my own legs. They're shaky, imperfect, but they're mine. And I will rebuild a life without any of you. My voice broke, but I pushed through. The saddest part is I still love you. All of you. That's the cruelest thing about family betrayal. The love doesn't just die. It stays like a wound that won't heal, aching for something that's gone forever. But I'll carry that wound standing. And every step I take, every breath I draw, every day I survive is proof that you failed. You tried to destroy me, and you failed. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Thank you, Your Honor, for giving me justice. It won't heal me, but it matters. I'm sitting in my small apartment in Tima, watching the sun set over the Atlantic Ocean. It's a modest place, 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for Alma when she visits. But it's mine, bought with money from a civil settlement against all 3 defendants and Uncle Ya's insurance. I work from home now as a victim advocate, helping other Ghanaians navigate the trauma of family violence and hit and runs. The organization I founded, Rising Again Foundation, has helped over 200 people in 3 years. I still use the walker for longer distances. Some days are harder than others. Rainy season makes everything hurt, the humidity turning my spine into a weather gauge. But I'm here. I'm standing. I am surviving. My daughter Alma, now 11, understands more than I wish she had to. She knows her father is in prison, knows her uncle and granduncle hurt me. But she's resilient, in therapy, doing well in school. Mommy, she asked last week, do you think you'll ever forgive them? I thought about it carefully before answering. Forgiveness is complicated, baby. I've forgiven them in the sense that I'm not angry anymore. The rage burned itself out. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen or welcoming them back into our lives. It means I've made peace with what happened so it doesn't poison my future. She nodded, wise beyond her years. I'm proud of you, Mommy, for being brave, for standing up. Those words meant more than any verdict. My mother writes occasionally. I don't respond. She chose her side, and I've chosen mine. Some betrayals are too deep to bridge, even with time. Kofi sent letters from Nsawam prison, dozens of them. I burned the first 20 without reading them. The 21st, I opened. It was raw, honest, broken. I think about that night every day. Every single day, for 3 years, 8 months, and 12 days. I see your face in that split second before impact. I hear you screaming my name. I feel the steering wheel in my hands and my foot on the accelerator when it should have been on the brake. I live with that, Ajoa. I will live with it until I die. He wrote about prison, the violence, the fear, the knowledge that he deserves every moment of suffering because I suffered more. He wrote about AA meetings, about confronting his alcoholism, about the long road to becoming someone worthy of redemption. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he ended. I know I don't deserve it, may never deserve it. I just needed you to know. I'm sorry. I'm so profoundly, devastatingly sorry. And I'm using every day here to become someone who would never hurt you again, even though I know I'll never get the chance to prove it. I keep that letter, not because I've forgiven him, but because it's honest. It's the first true thing he's said to me since that night. Kwame is at Nsawam too, in a different block. I've heard through mutual friends that he's bitter, angry, blames me for his imprisonment. That tells me everything I need to know. He still doesn't accept responsibility. He's still the same man who filed divorce papers rather than face his guilt. Uncle Ya died last year. Heart attack in prison. He was 65. His wife, my Auntie Isai, reached out to tell me, asked if I'd come to the funeral. I didn't go. I'd mourned the uncle I loved years ago. The man who died in Nsawam was a stranger who tried to kill me. I met Kwabena at a support group for trauma survivors. He's a teacher from Kumasi, kind and patient, with a limp from a motorcycle accident that left him with chronic pain. We understood each other's limitations, celebrated each other's victories. 6 months ago, he asked me to marry him. I said yes, but not without hesitation, not without the scars of betrayal making me doubt whether I could ever trust again. He understood. I see you, Ajoa, he said, holding my hands. Not the woman you were before. Not who you might have been without the accident. I see who you are now, strong, brave, broken, and healing all at once. And that woman is who I love. We're planning a small wedding. Just close friends, Amma, Chioma, who'll be my maid of honor, and a few people from my victim advocacy work. No biological family. They forfeited that right when they chose lies over love. Sometimes I think about that night, still crossing that intersection, still seeing those headlights. But now the memory doesn't paralyze me. It reminds me that I survived something unsurvivable. That I walked again when doctors said I never would. That I built a new life from ruins. The body keeps the score, Chioma always said. And my body is a map of survival. Scars from surgeries, muscles rebuilt through torturous therapy, nerves that fire wrong but fire nonetheless, legs that shake but stand. I am the woman who was betrayed by her family and lived to tell the story. I am the witness who identified her own brother as her attempted murderer. I am the survivor who learned to walk again so she could walk into a courtroom and demand justice. And every morning when I wake up, when I take those first difficult steps from bed to bathroom, when I greet Amma with a smile despite the chronic pain, I am winning. Because they bet I'd die on that street. They bet I'd never remember their faces. They bet I'd stay silent, even if I did remember, too afraid of destroying the family to pursue truth. They lost every bet. And I won everything that matters. My truth, my voice, my life, and most importantly, my choice to keep living it on my terms, despite everything they took, despite every scar they left, despite the permanent damage they caused. Today marks 10 years since that night on OSU Oxford Street. A decade since my family tried to erase me. A decade since I began the impossible journey back to standing. I'm 63 now, my hair showing silver at the temples, my face lined with years that have taught me more about human nature than I ever wanted to know. But I'm here, still standing, still walking, still surviving. Amma graduated from the University of Ghana last month with a degree in social work. She wants to help trauma survivors, wants to work with my foundation. When I watched her walk across that stage, I cried, not from pain for once, but from pride. She'd grown up witnessing her mother's fight for justice, her long recovery, her refusal to give up. And instead of being broken by it, she'd become someone who wanted to help others heal. Kofi was released from Sawam 2 years ago, having served 13 of his 15 years with time off for good behavior. He moved to Takoradi, far from Accra, far from the memories. He works as a substance abuse counselor, helping others avoid the mistakes that destroyed his life and nearly ended mine. He sent a letter last year, not asking to meet, just updating me on his life, thanking me for the gift of consequences that had saved him from himself. Prison broke me, he wrote, but it also rebuilt me into someone who could face what I'd done, someone who could help others avoid that same darkness. I'm 11 years sober now. I'll never touch alcohol again, not because of the law, but because of what it cost you. Cost us. I wrote back, the first contact in years. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement, recognition that people can change, even if the damage they cause remains permanent. Kwame is still in prison, with 2 years left on his sentence. I've heard nothing from him. Perhaps that's for the best. Some people never develop the capacity for genuine remorse. My mother died 4 years ago. Cancer. She asked to see me at the end. I went not for her, but for myself, to close that chapter without regrets. She was thin, frail, barely recognizable. But her eyes held the same guilt they'd carried for a decade. I chose wrong, she whispered in Chui, her voice barely audible. Every day, I chose wrong. I put my son's freedom above your truth. I watched you suffer and said nothing. I held your hand while lying to your face. She gripped my hand weakly. I don't expect forgiveness, Ajoa. I don't deserve it. I just need you to know you were right to testify, right to pursue justice, right to walk away from all of us. You were the brave one, the strong one. I was just a coward who loved the wrong way. I held her hand as she died, tears streaming down both our faces. Not reconciliation. The wounds were too deep for that. But closure. The acknowledgement that some choices can't be unmade, some betrayals can't be forgiven, but life goes on anyway. The Rising Again Foundation now operates in 6 Ghanaian cities and has partnered with similar organizations across West Africa. We've helped over 3,000 victims of family violence find justice, healing, and resources to rebuild their lives. Every person we help is a testament to the power of surviving, of refusing to let the worst moment of your life write your entire story. Kwabena and I celebrated our 9th wedding anniversary last month. He still sees me, all of me, scars and strength, trauma and triumph. Our marriage isn't perfect. PTSD and chronic pain don't make for easy relationships. But it's real, built on truth rather than lies, on acceptance rather than expectations. Today, on this anniversary of my destruction and resurrection, I really walked, with just a cane for balance, down to OSU Oxford Street, to that intersection where my family tried to erase me. The streetlight is different now, LED instead of that old sodium lamp. The shops have changed owners, but the intersection remains indifferent to the violence it witnessed, to the blood that stained its pavement. I stood there for a long time, feeling the evening breeze from the Atlantic, hearing the sounds of Accra's chaotic traffic, smelling street food and car exhaust, and life continuing all around me. And I forgave myself for loving people who didn't deserve it, for trusting family who betrayed that trust, for all the times I'd blamed myself, wondered if I'd been a better sister would Kofi have stopped, if I'd been a better wife would Kwame have chosen differently, if I'd somehow deserved what happened. I didn't deserve it. Nobody deserves that. And forgiving myself for being human, for being vulnerable, for loving, that was the final piece of healing I needed. I walked away from that intersection slowly, carefully, but under my own power. Behind me, the streetlight cycled through its colors, red, yellow, green. Life moving forward, as it always does, as it always will. Tomorrow, I'll wake up to chronic pain, to the reality of permanent spinal damage, to legs that will never work quite right. But I'll also wake up to purpose, to Amma, to Kwabena, to 3,000 survivors whose lives I've touched, to a foundation that bears my story forward. That's more than survival. That's transcendence. They tried to kill me on that street. They failed. And every day I live, every step I take, every survivor I help, every truth I speak, that's my victory.